Hello, everybody. You're listening to the All Metal Mode podcast with myself, Mr. Mike Hare, and Dorian Cook. Dorian was out last week. I forget why now. We'll have to ask him when
Allergies.
we bring allergies. Yeah, you were sick, weren't you? Yeah, he's back this week, and he sure sounds better than he does last week. I knew you were sick somehow. I just couldn't remember how you were sick for a second. Before we get into the show, tomorrow Dirt Digest magazine will be available. The April issue will be out tomorrow, so look forward to that. I apologize for last week, guys. I don't know what happened. In the middle of the podcast, my screen just went black. My computer didn't shut down. I don't know what happened. It's never happened before on this computer, so I don't know. I haven't had an issue since. But I sure apologize to everybody for that for last week. One last thing I want to say before we get into it. This is I'm gonna say it real quick and we're gonna move on, because this is metal detecting, treasure hunting. This isn't about the COVID-19. I hope everybody's taking it serious. I just read an article that had a video of Trump accompanied with it today. I did not get to watch the video, but the article was saying, in the video, Trump says this and Trump says that. I just didn't have the time. They're expecting upwards of 100,000 to 240,000 deaths over the next 2 to 3 weeks, and possibly in the millions by summer. Yesterday, we had to go out to go pick up Peyton. We didn't go anywhere else. We didn't go anywhere. But as we passed Target, Walmart, and all the other places, I can tell you enough people are not taking this serious. We go out for walks where nobody's around us. Other than that, we don't leave the house unless we need something. Steph goes. And the way everybody's buying things up, she's leaving every 2 to 3 days. She's taking hand sanitizer, taking a lot of precautions, washing up and stuff. She thought everybody was doing really good. The other day she went and she said there were whole families in there with their kids and everything. And I just hope you guys take it serious. It's such a something we all need to, watch what we're doing. Okay, but this is about metal detecting, so we're going to get into it. But before we get into, we got to talk to Dorian. Dorian, tell us about this cache you just found.
Well, it's been a long time coming. I had a long dry spell. For 48 years of metal detecting, it's been quite a while. It's not my first cache, but it has been a long time. And I have to admit to you that you know what? It's not even the value. It's the feeling, of actually having found it and brought it out and said, yeah, I haven't completely lost it in my old age. I can still do a few things. I think that to me is as valuable as whatever, it proves out to be. I haven't even figured up yet what, exactly we've got there. But I can tell you this, I've already got it off site and in secured storage because I won't keep something like that around my house. But, it's a project that I've worked for most of a year. It involved 2 jars of coins that a person who didn't like currency, didn't trust currency, was afraid that they were going to devalue the money. I don't know if he was a conspiracy theorist. I don't know that much, but I know that that's not an unusual thing. It is a statistical fact that as late as 1920, only 10% of the American people were using banks to keep their money in. Now, where were they keeping it? Well, they were keeping it in, boxes under the bed, holes in the wall, buried in a mason jar, inside the barn door or between the house and the well, and on it goes. And I can guarantee you that tonight, while we're talking, Mike, there are people that right now are digging holes and putting mason jars full of hard money in the ground. That's been, I mean,
Oh yeah,
the
yeah.
hot, yeah, the hiding of caches has been going on for a long time. Now, because of this current virus crisis, they're talking about the possibility of a global economy collapse. And your older people know that economy collapses can cause runs on banks, and the banks close, and you can't even get money out of an ATM. And so, how are they going to prepare for that? Because the older people tend to prepare, while the young people say, "Oh, well, tomorrow's another day," and they're going to hide their money, and a lot of them are going to, from 60 on up, they're going to put it back in the ground. And so these caches will continue to be created. Mine is not super old. Somebody's already accused me of faking it. And if I was going to fake this, I would have it look really, really old, mid 1800s, and something like that, But I got to tell you, a lot of these coins are, well, they're almost slick and smooth because this guy wasn't interested in numismatical value. He just wanted the silver and gold value, and so that's basically, what this cache is made of, and it's less than, I'd say somewhere, it's got to be less than 40 years old. He's no longer around, and I can't go into all the details because I still have a second jar, and I guess the naysayers, they're really going to go to town on me if I do find a second. If I post it, I may not even post a second one if I find it. But I thought, and this is the only time I've ever posted, anywhere on a cache. I've never shown an actual cache. Well, maybe one in a treasure magazine, a small one. It was like a pint mason jar. I've never done that before, but we've got a lot of new people, and they're fighting that psychological barrier of well, it's all been found, or the glory days of metal detecting are past, and it really, it isn't. And I thought maybe that this might inspire some people. I'm not trying to stir up jealousy or envy. I just want to say that what I did, anybody that's listening can do, but you might have to learn some of the things I've learned over 48 years of how to increase the odds that you will find a cache. It may take a long time for those odds to pay off, but if you bought a lottery ticket, would you rather have odds of 1 in 10 million or 1 in 1,000?
Right.
So the idea is make the odds the best that you can. And if you keep using that technique, eventually the odds go up and up that you're going to make a find. I think Dennis Wynn, if he's listening, Dennis, call in tonight and give me an amen on this, because Dennis is a cache hunter extraordinaire. And
he's listening in and he's commenting. So yeah, he's saying, oh shoot, I just read it. Screw the naysayers. Something I want to say about this is, you said that there's still caches being hidden. That's absolutely true. I'll tell you a couple that one I suspect and one I completely believe. I know somebody who bought a house. And it had sit vacant for a couple years. The guy died suddenly. His daughter lived all the way across the other side of the country, and there was a lawsuit against him. Now, this is all fact, and I don't want to go into details because if there is something, I'd sure like the opportunity to find it. But people said, well, he made money, he did stuff, but he didn't, when he died, he didn't have a bank account, he didn't have any money. And locals in this very, very small rural, I struggle with that word, community, sure, have talked to the new owners. A few people have approached him and said, we've wondered what he did with his money. So there's a possible one, and we're talking just the last couple of years. I'll tell you another one that I know of. A friend of mine, a good friend of his that I never even met, passed away, or his dad passed away. And my friend metal detects, and he said, can you come out and help me look for some coins and stuff my dad buried? And I know he's been out a couple times, hasn't found anything, but he knows it was, he suspected it, and I forget the full story, but he went to his dad's best friend, and he said, I think dad buried some stuff. Did he ever say anything to you about it? He said, I know he buried some stuff. He said, I think within like a year of him passing, or maybe it was like 2 years, he'd welded a end on an aluminum pipe for him. And he said he had it stuffed full of money. Or had the one end screw on, I forget, but he knew that his intentions was to bury money with that and stuff. I mean, there are still people who don't trust banks or for whatever reason. I believe that people have cached guns and ammunition and different things like that, supplies. It still happens. I mean, I think it's human nature. And I agree with you, Dorian. It has probably gone up considerably with this virus scare.
But and some of those, I mean, I'm not wishing this on anyone, but statistically, some of the people that have done this are going to end up dying with this, and there's going to be more lost caches. Mm-hmm. So that's life. That's life and death on this old planet, and it's not about like I said, wishing anything bad on anybody, but it is a fact it will happen. So. Mike, I'm getting a lot of questions, and I understand the curiosity. How what's the dates on the coins? How deep was it? And please understand that this is a project still in progress, because I really do want to find another jar. I really do, Mm-hmm. And I'm not going to give out certain details, but I will tell for everybody. I'm not going to write 40 or 50 messages here. But I'll tell you over on the podcast, the coins are not real old. The oldest coins that I haven't gone and looked at every single date because my eyesight's not that good. I have to do it with a magnifying glass and all that, and there's a lot of coins, frankly. So I did see barber dimes in the 1890s, but I saw some Roosevelt dimes that are proof coins that are dated 64. So, it's a range of the kind of stuff you get if you go to a coin dealer and you buy bulk silver. I guess somebody's going to say, oh, he knows about buying bulk silver, so that proves that he went to a coin dealer and bought bulk silver. Well, listen, I ran the world's biggest treasure hunt, and I bought amounts of silver that would blow your mind from coin dealers. So, that goes all the way back to the 70s. Yeah, I absolutely could fake this. I could. I could do a really good job on it, and I might even fool everybody. But all of you out there that know me, you know that's not the way I'm built. I have no need to impress you that I found, the Oak Island treasure, or that I dug up the biggest KGC hoard in history. I did hunt one of the biggest KGC hoards, but I didn't dig it up. I've had my share of empty holes. I've successfully followed some major treasure stories, and I found the site, but I'd been beat to it. One of them was a Wells Fargo box. You could still see the shape of the box in the hole. And the hole had been opened maybe 3 days before I got there with my partner. And the sad thing was we had put off going there for a month because of one thing or another. First he canceled, then I canceled. And we finally got together, but we were late. If we had gone when we first scheduled, that would have been ours. It would have been a biggie because it was a chest with newly minted $20 gold pieces from the San Francisco Mint, and we lost it. We had a documented story on it. It was a stagecoach robbery and all that, and it was in Oklahoma. So, this is, I've hunted big-time stuff, and if I had found big-time stuff, I guess I wouldn't be driving a 2007 SUV, but I have found stuff, And I've spent a lot of money hunting treasure. I spent 2 years of my life hunting treasure professionally. I supported myself for 2 years. And but you hit stretches where things go dry, and if you don't find anything, you got to go back to work. So those are some of the things involved for the guys that end up getting into more than just coin hunting the local park or going out in the battlefield and digging mini balls. I love to go out in the battlefield and dig mini balls. I can't even explain why I like it so much, but I have done it for 40 years, and I suppose it's easy. You can go hunt a Civil War site for those treasures without a lot of expense and without a lot of preparation, a lot of investment in equipment or anything. You just have your detector and your shovel and your permission, and you go. So, those are my thoughts on that. But like I said, there's so many people that are listening or watching that are capable of doing this, and if you'll bear down and learn the tricks of the trade, just like relic hunters have to learn how to hunt relics, coin hunters learn how to hunt coins, nugget hunters have to learn the tricks of the nugget hunting trade. That's just a part of metal detecting, and it all comes down to how motivated are you. Are you willing to do that? Are you willing to hunt a cache site that you have a good story on, and you come back time after time empty-handed? Would you do that over 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 years and not give up? I'll guarantee you a lot of people that found caches, that's exactly what they did. Exactly what they did. Mm-hmm. In this case, mine was fairly brief. It was only part of a year, most of a year actually, before I hit something.
So let's change gears a little bit. You told me a great story earlier, and I would like to. We can always come back to caches and stuff. Let me start off. I want to share a really cool story. I've maybe shared it here before, but let me give you a quick break and let me share a story. So,
absolutely.
Years ago, when I was a dealer in Ohio, I had a couple guys buy. I think one bought an E-Track and one bought a CTX. Neither one of them were new to metal detecting. They'd both been metal detecting for a little bit. And I talked to them about field hunting. This would probably be going on 10 years ago or so. And neither one of them had tried field hunting, and I talked to them about it and told them they should. Well, before that, I'd written a book, nothing special. I self-published it on pretty much sites that are gone in the county that they're from, and I kind of did it. I was hoping to go down a different path with it, and that was kind of a test, and I still haven't. Of course, I am working on another book that I'm real close to wrapping up. But anyhow, so I said, well, I've got this book. I'll give it to you guys, and it gives a lot of sites here in this county and stuff. Well, the one had a friend, and that was a big farmer in the area, and him and his farmer friend that knows all the other farmers. If you can get in with one farmer, man, you're in. Drove around and they were looking for sites off the book, and he pulled up to this pasture and he said, "Well, Mike's showing that there was a house here, in this pasture." And he goes, "Oh, I know this guy real well. Let's go talk to him." So they got permission. They went out there, him and his buddy that I sold a detector to, both of them. And Dorian, their very first field site, what they believe, what a local historian believes, what they found was where a blockhouse was during the War of 1812.
Oh, sweet!
They found buttons and buckles, and they found an OVM buckle. One of them did. I don't remember who. They found early coins, everything that fit that time period really good. And I
Well, of
love that
course.
story, because I've hunted probably hundreds of field sites. And I'll tell you, I've never gotten into one that good, but their very first one had been what they believe was a blockhouse at one point.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Now the OVM would be Civil War period.
Yes, yes. Well,
Um,
and I think figured some of that. Maybe it had been in you. Well, I mean, it was on the map at that time. After that, even. So maybe it went from War of 1812 all the way up or something. We're not nobody knows for sure, but yeah, an OVM buckle. But most of it was more related earlier, from what I recall. I've lost touch with him. I haven't talked to him in years, but boy, what a first field site. I know Aggie does a lot of field hunting. We've probably. I don't know how far south or southeast Aggie's gotten into the fields. Aggie's in the chat tonight, but I wouldn't be surprised. I'm sure we've hunted some of the same fields up by her from when I used to hunt with Tim. But she'll tell you. I know she's found some good stuff and got into some good field sites. But she probably hasn't gotten into one that good either. And all these years I've been doing it, I've never gotten into one that good. But I thought that was a neat. Very first time out. Talk about being ruined.
but Mike, you haven't gotten into one yet, and that's my very, very, that's my point.
Mm-hmm.
You keep trying to get into one like that. All of you out there, if you haven't gotten into one yet, okay, fine. It's just like your first silver coin. You never found it until you did. And so keep on going. And just let the dry runs, just flush them down the creek, let them go on down to the river, and keep on going upstream. Just keep going. Mm-hmm. That perseverance will win the day when nothing else will. We had a gentleman on the podcast several weeks ago, Gary Persinger. I think a lot of you heard him. Mm-hmm. Gary is doing something that I admire him greatly for. Gary gets out and he walks and he walks and he walks. And by walking miles, he finds Civil War sites and camps that nobody else has because they won't do that. They won't do that,
right.
And he's blowing us all away at our little group with his finds, just one after another. And everybody thinks, oh, well, he's just got this one big site that's just covered with relics. And no, he's got numerous sites, and they all produce for him. He's a great hunter, but he has that thing of being willing to walk as far as it takes. He's not scared to come back empty-handed from a hunt because he knows if he keeps doing this, he's going to get into sites that other people didn't because they didn't put out that much effort.
Yes. I've written, I know, at least 3 articles on that. And what it boils down to, it's not always that you have to get out farther. And I mean, that helps. But sometimes it's thinking outside the box and understanding a lot of treasure hunters, a lot of detectorists are lazy. And, I've told the story one time I was at a school, and a school's been hunted. The school that was on it is still on it. I want to say is from the teens or 20s, but there's been schools on the property since, if I recall, 1848, 1842, something like that. And some nice stuff come out of there that had been missed that was deeper, but, it was hunted thoroughly. And I was on all fours detecting under a big bush, like a tree kind of bush. I don't know what it was. And the guy I was with kind of laughing and making fun of me. And I found a fatty Indian under there. And, sometimes, I've been to hunted out places that I know has seen detectorists year after year, and I pull something out because I'll get on all fours. I'll kick down the brush.
Yeah.
Do that kind of stuff. And, if you'll do that, so many detectorists will get into a trashy area or heavy iron, and they'll turn right out of it. And I'll give you a good example. It's gone now. Down in Lancaster, Ohio, I believe it was North School. And Dorian, you could drive by that school. It was probably a city block or two. Now, most of what I found was in the front, which was much smaller area. But I dug out over 200 wheat pennies, silver tokens, you name it, out of that place. And what gave me, most of that, what gave me the advantage was having a detector that was going deeper than what most of them had, because it was deep. I mean, it was rare to find stuff 6 inches deeper. There'd been fill put in over the years. There was you got down through the grass, and then there was gravel for a couple inches, and then it, so it was nothing to find the older stuff at 8 to 10 inches, and I think a lot of them couldn't make it, but I had taken a lot of guys there within a couple years. I'd seen guys there. I was coming home from the grocery once, and I seen about 10 guys metal detecting there. I ran home, put my groceries away, and I wanted to go talk to them, see if it had to have been a club, and they were gone by the time I got back there. I was there one time, and an old guy come up and told me he'd been hunting at school for over 20 years. It'd been hunted, but what I found is at one point the stones were still there, but there was a wrought iron fence going across the front of it at one time. Somebody had come through and cut it out. I don't know if it was a city or what.
Wow.
And from that fence, for about 15 yards towards the school, was so much iron and so much trash. Everybody I ever took there would walk out of it, including myself. And one day I told myself, I'm going to stay in it, and I'm going to work it slow, and I'm going to take my time. Nobody hunts that. Nobody can stand all the noises. Nobody can stand how trashy and stuff that is. And over just, a few hours at a time, I couldn't take all that going off in my ear for long periods of time, an hour or two at a time for a couple weeks. I found Indian heads, tokens. I found two centers out of there, a large cent out of that area. Just a ton of stuff that nobody would take the time to hunt and slow down and hunt in that really trashy iron infested area. And, sometimes it's just thinking outside the box, doing what other detectors won't do. I'm sorry, Dorian, go ahead.
No, it's fine. It's all good points, good stuff. Mike, I have, you brought to mind a Civil War treasure story that I lived that I'd like to share. Because, it's treasures come in many shapes, sizes, and values. You don't have to have a pile of coins like I found in a jar, to have treasure. Sometimes just 6 or 7 or 10, or maybe Granny's egg money with maybe 30 coins in the bottom of a pint mason jar that was buried in the corner of her little garden plot out behind the house. Mm-hmm. There may be numismatical pieces in there that make that worth, 5 figures. You just never know. But, I would say over the years that the standard for finding treasure, in a sense, with Civil War relic hunters, is to find a Confederate belt buckle. That's kind of a rite of passage. You find a Confederate belt buckle, and it's like, yeah, okay, cool. Now you're really a Civil War relic hunter. And they have eluded a lot of people. I'd say the odds are, if you want to play the odds now, and this is important because, no matter how well you figure the odds, sometimes the odds laugh at you and perform in a way totally unexpected, if you please. The odds are that you'll find 10 U.S. belt buckles, Union belt buckles, before you'll find one Confederate. They were just so much more numerous. Well, that's why the Confederate buckles are so valuable, and everybody wants them because they're so much more scarce. And when I was working for Charles Garrett, I got an invitation from a Garrett dealer up at Murfreesboro, Tennessee, to come up and hunt with him and his two hunting buddies at a camp that had been inhabited by the 1st Alabama Cavalry, a Confederate unit. And they had just, I guess, more or less gotten into camp at the end of the day, were setting up, and a raiding party that was operating behind the lines of Union cavalry caught them, as we kind of like to say, in their pajamas, so to speak. And they didn't even put up a fight. They just surrendered. And the lieutenant's report in the official record said that they burned all their equipment belts. Piled them up and burned them. So my dealer and his buddies had found that site. And by the time I got there to take advantage of the invitation, they had already pulled 22 CS stamped brass buckles, at the time probably worth about $2,000 a piece. And I'm sorry, they had pulled 21 buckles. So we go out, and the dealer explains to me, he's quite a relic hunter, and I'm not giving out his name because I don't have permission to use it, but he's still alive, still dealing relics, and he's an awesome hunter. He's one of the great ones, like Dennis Wynn. And anyway, he gave us a little speech before we started hunting, and he says, he tells me, he says, we've gridded off this whole camp, and we've hunted every square foot of it. He said, the last place we haven't hunted is over there underneath that raspberry briar patch. So that's where we're going to hunt today. So, okay, it's his permission, and he sets the rules. And so I go over there with him, and we have to literally crawl on our hands and knees. And for, 2.5 hours, those raspberry bushes ate me alive. And at the end of that time, I couldn't take it anymore, and I had to get out from under those bushes and stand up straight and try to wash off some of my bleeding wounds from all the briar tears I had on my exposed flesh. So I get out from under, and I wander back into the cleared area of the camp, the area that they've gridded off and hunted every square foot. And my host says, where are you going? I told you there's nothing there. We've already hunted it out. I said, yeah, I'm sure you're right. I said, but I can't take it down there on my knees anymore, underneath this briar patch. I need a break. So I'm going to hunt out here, just swing out here for a while just to so I can stand up for a while. He says, okay. He says, but you're not going to find anything. So I've been hunting about 10 minutes, and I noticed a little bush about 18 inches high. And I thought to myself, well, I wonder if anybody stuck a detector back under that bush. And I was using a Garrett Groundhog 1979 model with the Garrett Groundhog ADS, actually, with the 10-inch coil. And I stuck swung it under that edge of that bush, and it screamed at me. It told me I had a good non-ferrous reading. So I kind of do my little trick of detuning the coil where I shrink it down to where I can trace the shape of the signal. And I knew that it was bigger than a button. I knew it was a good-sized brass object. And my old heart started thumping, or my young heart, I should say. And so, I got down and removed the bush out of the way, and I carefully began digging. And about 10 inches, I used a probe, and I was probing gently, and I touched what I knew had to be the metal object. So I carefully excavated, and I saw the round edge and the brownish red color. Now, let me explain something to you about like belt buckles and things. If they go through a fire, instead of that nice green patina that brass ordinarily gets from just resting underground for 150 years, if they go through a fire, the brass turns kind of a rusty brown red color. and you won't have that green patina on. At least I've never seen any that did, that had been through a fire. Well, the fire had melted the solder on the hooks, so the hooks were gone off the back. And I pulled it out, and I thought that it was just a plain oval buckle, which would still make it CS. But I was disappointed because I thought, oh man, I thought I had a buckle with a CS on it. And then I noticed there was some dirt and root debris clinging to the front, and I was carefully brushing it, and I saw the top of a C where it had been stamped, into the back of the buckle and was pushed out from the front. And then I cleaned it a little more, and buddy, my heart was pounding away, and I had my first CS buckle. So in the area that had been totally cleaned out, gridded off, every square foot worked, I got the 22nd CS eggshell buckle. And I'm sorry to say that I think it kind of hurt my host, because I think he thought he would, if there was a buckle was found, that he was going to be the one that did it. But anyway, I never got another invitation to hunt with him. But that was my Civil War treasure story. That was the most valuable single relic that I ever had, and I had it a whole 2 days before it was stolen from me. So, but they can't take away the thrill of the discovery. Did you have something else you wanted to jump in with, Mike?
No, not right now. I'm good.
Okay.
I'm good.
How about we do the story I told you before the show?
Yeah, I'd love to hear that one.
Okay. All right. I was responsible for our dealers when I worked for Garrett. That was part of my responsibilities in marketing, and we had a dealer down in Tampa, Florida, I believe, if I remember right, and his name was Bill Powers. And Bill was a avid hunter, and that's one of the reasons we made him a dealer. And Bill told me a story that I just loved, and this goes to show you this particular treasure adventure was not a lot of super valuable treasure, but it was indeed a treasure finding expedition, and it had a strange twist you're going to love. He took his buddy Charlie, I believe was his name, and they went. What Bill had done, he'd researched out an old fort site that's set on the banks of the Suwannee River, right next to an old ford. So he, did his map work and stuff, and went to the area, and they could see the cut down through the big high bank to the water's edge, and they could see a cut on the other side. So it was obvious that this was the ford. And they actually started finding dropped musket balls right in the road on the slope down to the ford. Well, they decided the ford had to sit up there on the bluff, so they went up on the bluff, and they started finding artifacts immediately, buttons, coins. Bill, within 15 minutes, he found in the same hole 2 1812 double-struck dimes. They were mint errors. And he told me later that at that time, back in the 70s, they appraised out at over $1,200 a piece. So, treasure can come totally unexpectedly in a very small package. You don't have to have a truckload of gold bars to have treasure sometimes. So anyway, they're having a ball. The site's never been worked. They're just cleaning up. And Bill's just detecting away, and then he hears his partner, Charlie, say, Bill, help me, Bill. Help me, Bill. It's going to eat me, Bill. And Bill looks over, and his buddy Charlie's down on his knees with a fresh dug hole in front of him, and he's frozen. I mean, he is frozen, not moving a muscle, because right in front of him is a 15-foot long snake with a head about as wide as a basketball, and it's looking right down into the hole he's dug about 6 inches from his crotch. And it is bright metallic purple is the color of this snake. And poor Charlie's never seen one before. but the snake is called an indigo snake, and they inhabit the Southwest. I saw one down at Fort Clark, Texas, when I was hunting the old part of the fort site. It was laying out in the road sunning itself, and it was 9 feet long, and they look just like purple metal. If you've ever seen one of these, hot rods or cars with a purple metallic paint job, that's what this snake looks like. And they are totally non-venomous, and they are not aggressive. They're a very curious breed. Well, Charlie was having trouble being convinced. No, Bill, you've got to help me. Bill, it's going to kill me. Bill, help me. And he says, Charlie, it's an indigo snake. It's not going to hurt you. It's just curious about what you're doing. Really, Bill? Are you sure, Bill? He says, yes, Charlie. You can get up and move on. So Charlie, test moves a muscle, and the snake just raises his head and looks at him and scares him again, but doesn't make any move towards him. And so Charlie backs up and stands up. And Bill Powers told me that snake followed them around because they're territorial. They stake out a territory, and Bill and Charlie were in their territory, that snake's territory, and it followed them around all that afternoon. And every time they dig a hole, it would crawl over and look down into it. Never made an aggressive move. And he said they made 2 more trips back to that site, and the snake met them both times and did the same thing. So there you go. There's a treasure story with an amazing twist to it.
That is neat. Now, but tell them do you remember what all they found there?
I know I don't have an inventory. I've hunted a lot of fort sites myself, and I've heard guys tell stories. And if I could do it all over, I'd have carried one of these little digital recorders if they'd had them, and I would have recorded these stories, and I would have an archive of probably several thousand, Mm-hmm. But you just have to pull from memory. See, the one nice thing about old age is your long-term memory gets sharper. You start to remember things in detail that happened a long time ago, but you might forget where you laid your car keys 2 minutes ago. So that's why some of these details, are so clear about what we found or what somebody found, the stories they told.
Yeah.
There's, Mike, please go ahead if you've got something else. Otherwise, I'll jump into another one.
Well, I got one that's there's actually 2 little stories, but they make the same point. Many years back, well, not that many years ago, maybe 10 years ago or so, I knew somebody who got permission for a private park. And he took me there after he had dug hundreds of silver coins out of there. He took a few different people there. One guy, his best day was like 21 or 22 silver coins. I think my best day was 12. Didn't get to hunt it as long. And there's another story, and boy, I can't remember what was found, except I remember that there were some really unique coins found. Like, I want to say like a silver 20-cent coin, a couple 2-centers. I remember that there were some really odd coins, and that was actually found at a little park. Not even a tree, almost like a town square off to the, but not in the middle or anything, just off the side. In one of these towns that you'd blink, you blink and you miss it. And what's funny is I know of 2 very good detectorists that live within a few miles of this town. And one guy, he's been hunting probably going on darn near 35 years now. And had never hunted that. And what my point is, there are still places out there that haven't been hit or haven't been hit hard. you don't. It's easy to look at a site, especially public, and say, well, that's probably been pounded. And, I think some places just get overlooked, and maybe it has been pounded, but has it been, do you have a good detector and do you know how to use it? Can really make the difference. One that I'll tell you, and I'll probably never get back there again. And I hunted it, to my heart's content. Lancaster, Ohio Fairgrounds is a real good one. Anytime I move to a new area and I talk to somebody, hey, any place I could metal detect, and it always turns out, this park down here, this school, and I, cool. But, do you know anybody with an old house? Do you got a family member? That kind of thing. Several people told me the fairgrounds. Well, the fairgrounds, I probably lived 6 blocks from the fairgrounds. And after, many people mentioning it and stuff, I thought, what the heck, I'll go there, make sure that they allow metal detecting. And so I called down there one day and they said, yeah, we don't have a problem with it, just not in the front where the houses are and stuff. And so I go out there and there's like overflow parking in the grass. And because it was so close, it kind of always got put on the back burner, but it was kind of my fallback. And Dorian, I found over 40 silver coins out of there.
Wow.
Including a barber quarter, seeded dimes. I don't think I found a seeded quarter out there. Seeded dimes, Indian heads, Standing Liberty quarter. Matter of fact, I found a semi-key date barber, a dime. I don't remember what it was now, but looking it up, it's worth about $20. It was worth about $20 back then. I don't know if it's gone up or gone down. But I found a 1917 Type 1 or Type 2. I get them confused. Standing Liberty quarter with the date, full date. And I figured it was worth about $100. Well, I had a guy offer me $125 for it. It came out of those fairgrounds. And I had put that off for a couple of years, just assuming it had been, pounded. And I'm sure it had over the years. But, obviously they weren't getting down to the depth. Just because it's been pounded doesn't always mean it's hunted out. And I've had a couple of those. I'll tell you another one. And Bill's actually pretty far from there, but I know he knows some guys down that way. I've met some guys down that way. Chillicothe? No. I'm trying to Athens Fairgrounds. Bill, I don't know. I don't know how many I found. I think my best day down there was don't hold me to it, like 9 silver coins. And I was with a guy who found a beautiful seeded quarter out of there. You would think that those public places have been pounded, and sometimes they have. Sometimes you're not going to go there and find anything. But I would say, give it a shot though. You never know. It's easy to pass by some place and think to yourself, oh, it's been pounded, it's hunted out.
Yeah.
You don't know until you go there and try for yourself. You just don't.
Yeah, you're right. And there's interesting ways, thinking outside the box can really produce. I have a friend in Cincinnati, first name of Alex. I've tried to get him on the show, but he's a real private person as far as publicity. And Alex is one of the most successful treasure finders in the whole United States, period. I've seen what he's found. And he's expert in a lot of different, what I call disciplines. For example, there's a big dump site from downtown Cincinnati from the 1800s on the Ohio River, about 20 miles out of town. And Alex lives near that site, and he's walked it every week for like 25 years. And there's so much metal laying in plain sight. We're talking millions of pieces of bottles, old bottles, crying pieces. I make you cry when you see all these broken 1800s bottles, plates, every kind of metal that could be thrown away in a dump from that period is there, and it just paves the beach. And every time the Ohio River goes up and down, it's a whole new ball game. You cannot metal detect; it's impossible. You can dig for bottles back in the bank, but there is no electronic equipment that's any use down there. But Alex has picked up over 6,000 silver coins in that 25 years, wow. And he's gotten 4 U.S. gold coins. And his specialty is treasure hunting without a metal detector. He knows how to use a detector. He's found a lot of stuff with a detector, but he does things like, there's a lot of these 2-story row houses that date back to the early 1800s in Cincinnati. And a lot of them have been condemned by the city because of condition. Owners allowed them to deteriorate, or they wanted to build a new road, widen a 2-lane road into a 4-lane or something. And they'll board up the windows and doors before they actually demolish the structures. And Alex will pry up a piece of plywood and go in these buildings. And the things that he has found are amazing. He gets up in the attics. And he was telling me about one. He crawled all the way to where the roof came down to the eaves, and he saw that there was a space that he couldn't see into. And of course, he wears gloves to try avoid spider bites. But he reached down in there and he felt a book, and he got a hold of it and pulled it out. It was an old Bible. When he opened the front cover, 2 $20 U.S. gold pieces fell out.
Wow.
Yeah. See, that's the kind of stuff that he does. And by the way, Bill Marsh, you're getting your treasure stories in spades tonight, buddy. So don't worry if you don't get one right at the end.
Right. Hey, real quick, Dorian, something I forgot. We've got some people in chat. We want you to call in and share your story tonight. If you have a story, by all means, please call in, tell us the story. It can be whatever, of course, metal detecting, anything. Let me pull up the number because I don't have it. I don't have it memorized. The call-in number is 682-459-2977. We'd love to get at least a couple call-ins tonight. Tell us it doesn't have to be educational, but we'd love that. Anything you got to add to this conversation, give us a call. Give us a call, and we'd love to hear the story. Something I forgot, Dorian, and they're not in tonight. Jeff and Katie Urey. Katie is pregnant, and they are listeners, and I'm working on them. I'm trying to get him. If it's a boy, I want his name to be Mike.
And wait a minute now. So, and you want his middle name to be Squatch?
I'm fine with that. Be cute, and then just call him Squatch.
Oh man, I would feel so sorry for that kid having to go through school with a name like that. I'll tell you what, he'd be a fighter by the time he came out.
I think that's a heck of a name, Mike Squatch Urey. That's got a ring to it.
Oh, hey. Well, nothing else. Nothing else for fun. Oh, okay.
I don't think they're in tonight. Yeah, they're in trouble. They're in big trouble for not being here. But yeah, I'm working on them. I think that'd be a cute. And Jeff's a big guy. He's a big, tall dude. So Mike Squatch would work real good. That'd work real good. Again, if anybody wants to call in, Dennis, Tim York just popped in, Mike Fusen. I'd love to have Bill call in. Bill's not big on calling. Come on, Bill. Go do a couple shots of whiskey and call in. Aggie, if you're still there, Scotty D. Somebody call in. We're bored. Come on, share a story with us tonight. Somebody out there's got to have a story. 682-459-2977 is the call in. So if you got a story, give us a ring and share a good story with us. But go ahead, Go ahead, Dorian. We'll keep going.
All right. We'll give him another one here. Give him time to think about it.
Yeah.
This one has a great lesson in it. I had a father and son. The father approached me. They used Garrett detectors. And
I never knew you were married to a guy before, Dorian.
I never knew I was either.
You were getting ready to say husband and wife, weren't you?
Yeah. Yeah, I just never had much problem being confused about which bathroom to use. You know what I mean?
Yeah, right.
Okay. Well, anyway, yeah, you got me all Excuse me. Wow. All right. Folks, I am not coming out of the closet because I am not in the closet. So, all right.
You're not in the closet, just your husband is? Now I got him all messed up.
Yeah. Okay. All right. That'll be order in the court, or the bailiff's going to clear the courtroom. This father and son came to me with an offer. The guy was kind of sort of a wealthy guy. He was in oil real estate, something there in Dallas. Like, a lot of people. You met a lot of people that were involved in that, and he said, if you'll teach us to rally hunt, we'll pay all the expenses. We'll take my car. And I said, well, that sounds like a deal. And so we did some pretty long trips, and we took one to Port Hudson. And I was wanted to take them where I knew they could find, and I knew they could find a lot of stuff because I'd hunted there quite a few times, and I'd always done well, never come home empty-handed or disappointed. So I took them to a spot that I knew was productive, and I knew I hadn't near cleaned it out. There's just too much. And I told them, I said, you guys start hunting right here on this, this little flat spot up here on this little bluff. And I'm going to try to scout out, another area or two that haven't been worked. I have worked this before, but there's stuff here. And so I left them there with their Garrett detectors, and I went on through the woods. And boy, less than 10 minutes, here they came right after me. And I said, what are you guys doing? You're supposed to wait for me to get back where I left you. Well, they thought I had some secret place I was going to, and they got all worried about, me finding some kind of good relics that they couldn't find. And so suspicion had reared its ugly head. And I said, no, we're not going to do this. I said, come on. I took them right back to that spot where I left them. And I told them, put your detectors down and get your shovels. And I said, I'm going to hunt and I'm going to mark signals and I want you to dig for me. Well, in 30 minutes, Mike, I had them 30 signals behind. I was just knocking little divots out to show them where to dig. They could not keep up with me. The two of them could not keep up with me for digging the signals. I found over 50 mini balls and bullets in that 30 minutes. Now, remember, I wasn't digging them. I was just swinging a detector. There were so many there. And they had told me, well, there's nothing there. It's worked out. So I was hoping that they got the point and they got the lesson. See, your mind, your mind can defeat you. You can be on a good site, and you can decide. You can pass judgment on it too soon. You can't go onto a site and hunt for 10 or 15 minutes and say, "Oh, there's nothing here." I mean, you can do it.
Yeah.
But you and I both know that person is not going to make a lot of great finds over the course of their detecting activities if they do that.
Yeah, I've got a great story to go along with that when you're done.
Okay, got a little more to this story.
Go ahead.
Okay, the day wore on, and we'd been hunting for 3 days, and we were down. Actually, we were going to leave at 5 o'clock, and it was like 10 to 5. And I was down in a dry wash. It only flowed as a creek when it rained. And there was sand and gravel on the bottom of it. And there were banks above me about, 15 feet high on both sides of me. And, slanted. They weren't vertical, but they were steep. And the two guys, the father and son, are sitting on the bank up there. They've quit detecting, and they're watching me. And I'm down there just swinging away with 10 minutes to go.
Mm.
And I said, come on, guys. Sometimes the best find comes the last 5 minutes.
Right.
And I no sooner got those words out of my mouth than my Garrett Deep Seeker played sweet music to me.
Mm.
And I dug down in that gravel and that sand, and there, about 12 inches down, was a complete Civil War fired Hotchkiss shell, artillery shell, worth a good bit of money at that time. It was in perfect condition. It was the best find of our 3-day hunt, and I dug it right in front of these two guys. Right after I said, sometimes the best find comes the last 5 minutes.
Wow.
Oh, I thought, well, this must be proof that there's a God in heaven. Mm-hmm. It was so perfect timing, and I want to tell you, for that last 5 minutes, all you could see out of those two guys was elbows, and you know what?
Right.
They were swinging their detectors like crazy,
Mm-hmm.
So the point was, though, see, they got discouraged, and even though I'm trying to tell them, look, this is your first big relic hunt, guys. This is, you're not going to be able to keep up with me. I've dug thousands of artifacts. I've been on dozens, if not over 100 sites already. And you're not going to keep up with me. So don't try to keep up with me. Just try to do the best that you can, and you will find, and you will go home with artifacts.
Right, exactly. You bring up a real good point. Years and years ago, excuse me, I'm going to have to sneeze. Let me get the... Oh, I apologize. I think I got to the mute button quick enough. Boy, that one came out of nowhere. Years and years ago, I used to talk to Terry Barnhart quite a bit. It's been, we still talk now and then and send each other messages, but we used to talk a lot more when I lived in Ohio and stuff. And he was up in Northwest Ohio. And I know some of you in chat tonight have heard of Terry Barnhart. Well, Terry would message me, and tell me hunting. He was out of work right then. I think he was in school, if I remember right. And, so he would text me throughout the day and tell me how he was doing. Well, he went to a new house site and he'd been there an hour or two. I don't know how long. And he said he hadn't found anything and he was gonna leave, if I remember right, or thinking about leaving. I said, what else you got to do today? And he said, well, nothing. And I said, I am sitting here in an office with the windows closed working. I said, I would do anything to just be out swinging a detector. I said, stick it out, man. It takes one find to make your whole day. And he kind of laughed or whatever. And he said, I'm going to hunt some more. Well, he ended up finding a $50, and I don't remember what he found. I don't think it was, anything spectacular. It might have been a barber. I want to say it was a barber. And, but that's right along the lines of what you're saying. Don't give up. You might need to take breaks. Last time I went out when Gypsy and when it was me, Gypsy, and Dennis, I don't know what happened, Dorian. My back and my upper back and shoulders got so bad I was having a headache, and I didn't even hunt the second site we went to in the afternoon. But other than that, I keep going, and just because, don't get discouraged. If you're not finding stuff, keep swinging. That's how you increase your odds. Sometimes you dig a lot of junk for that one real good find of the day.
Absolutely.
There's down times, but if you leave too soon and you don't hunt it, if you got nothing better to do and you're outside and you're enjoying yourself, keep going. It can pay off so many times. It's paid off for me and many others. Even when you're getting bored, when you're having doubts you're going to find anything, It's worth it. Think about what you could be doing. You could be at home doing chores. You could be at work sitting in dark office or working your butt off outside, whatever you do, and keep going. Just keep going.
Absolutely. And I want to talk about reversals. Everybody has bucket lists, right? And we want to find a silver dollar. We want to find a seated dime, or whatever is on our bucket list. But fate has a way of turning things around, what I call reversals. I've never, 48 years, and I've never found a U.S. belt buckle. I've found over 14,000 Civil War artifacts. I found 3 U.S. cartridge box plates. And there are many, like Lee Sanzo in our group. Lee's found over 50 plates and buckles. So, I'm nowhere near up there with the big guys that found a lot of buckles. But my point being, my first Civil War belt buckle was a Confederate belt buckle. It blew the odds clear out of the water. I should have found 10 U.S. before I found that. See?
Yeah.
So a lot of things like that happened. I got on a site that was going to be made into a housing subdivision, and I got there after the whole Northern Virginia relic hunting crew, I don't know, hundreds maybe, people hunted it. And I walked into the woods, and there were dig holes 3 feet apart all over the woods. 3 feet apart. I'd never seen anything like it.
Huh.
And I was so discouraged, I turned around and headed back to my truck with my detector. Didn't even turn it on. I said, forget it. This is ridiculous. And on the way back, I had about a 10-minute walk back to the truck, and it was like, there's these old cartoons where you have this little devil sitting on one shoulder and this little angel on the other, and they're whispering in your ear, and it was like my conscience was whispering to me, you're the one who wrote an article for Lost Treasure magazine, on don't get psyched out on a worked out site.
Mm-hmm. And
here you are, retreating with your tail between your legs without even trying. And I thought, yeah, well, it was a site where they brought all the wounded from the Battle of Bull Run, the Union wounded, to treat them, a field hospital. There was a railroad track right beside the woods, and that was the railroad they used to bring all the wounded there. And so I thought, well, okay, nobody gets it all, so maybe I could go in here and get 3 or 4 mini balls, and I'll have souvenirs from Bull Run, because anything I find here was at the Bull Run battle. And the reason why that I don't go hunt the Bull Run battle is it is one of the few national military parks that got most of the battlefield inside the park, as far as I understand. So I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to do this. And Mike, I wasn't 5 minutes till I found my first mini ball between a couple of dig holes. And I kept finding, and I kept finding, and I had probably 20, 25 minis in my pouch. And I'm thinking, wow, this has been a great day. I'm happy. I can't go home unhappy now. This is amazing. And I come up to a big, rotten tree log laid on the ground about 20 feet long and about 16 inches thick. And I run my Garrett Deep Seeker with a 40-inch coil over the top of it. I thought, well, if it had any bullets in it, everybody would have dug them out by now, and there wasn't any signs it had been disturbed, so there wasn't any battle there, so the trees don't have bullets in them. Okay, it's a field hospital, so I'm thinking, all right, but I'll check it anyway. And I get this signal. My detector sounds off right in the middle of the log. I'm 16 inches above the ground on top of the log. So I kicked at the log, and it just crumbled and fell apart. It was really rotten. So I cleared out a big section where I could swing my detector right where I got the signal on top of the log. And when I got that coil down near the ground, it just really sounded off. And I checked it and discriminate, and it told me it was non-ferrous. And I dug down a full foot. That means the 12 inches plus 16 is 28 inches deep, over 2 feet deep. And I got my first U.S. cartridge box plate. Now, I mean, that right there would have totally made the day. I would have never believed that site was where I would find my first U.S. plate. So
Wow.
now I'm really getting into this, okay? Now I'm forgetting all about everybody's dick holes. I'm thinking, this is cool, I've got half a pouch full of relics, and I've only been here half a day.
Oh, that did not sound like you said dig.
You
Go
lost
ahead,
me.
Dorian. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Well, if everybody got a laugh at my expense, good.
I'm sorry. It sounded dirty. It sounded like you said a bad word, and it just with hole right behind it. With hole right behind it, Dorian. Oh. But it happens. It happens.
Okay. Well, towards the end of the day, now. And here's one of the points. Okay, I got a U.S. cartridge box plate. That's a great find. I'm on Relic Hunters Heaven Hill there. I'm saying, this is just unbelievable. This is one of the best hunts I've had in a day. And I guess it wasn't 30 minutes after I found the plate, I get another brass signal, and I dig a bridle rosette.
Oh, wow.
Now it's round in the middle, and then it has little brass tabs that stick up top and bottom with a little hole where it was tacked onto the leather of the bridle. And ordinarily, the common ones in the Civil War say U.S. on them. The Confederates, I don't think, had them like that. But this one didn't say U.S. It had an E, and underneath it had 2C, E2C. Well, as it turned out, before the Civil War started, there were 5 cavalry, and I forget if it's regiments or brigades. A brigade was about 5 regiments, if I remember right. Somebody out there that's more knowledgeable can correct me. But there were 5 basically cavalry units in the whole United States Army. And so they had personalized, these rosettes. So the one I had stood for E Company, 2nd Cavalry.
Oh, wow.
It's the only one I think to this day that's known to exist. It was a one. I mean, the odds were 100 to 1 that I would find a Confederate belt buckle before I'd ever find something like this. It was more rare than a Confederate belt buckle.
Wow.
And I dug it out of the most digged out place I had ever seen and been in my life. And I wasn't even done yet.
Wow.
I came upon a hole, and I was checking other people's holes. And I got, many balls they missed and stuff, but I got this one hole that was about 16 inches wide and 18 inches deep. And I got a really good signal. And I started digging down, and I didn't dig an inch in the bottom of that hole where the guy who dug it had stopped digging. I went an inch farther, and I started hitting dropped Sharps Hankins carbine bullets. I mean, these dudes were worth $7 or $8 a piece at the time, and I dug 36 out of that hole. And it hit me, and I realized what had happened. They were in a leather cartridge box, in a little tin case that went inside the leather. Well, the tin.
Oh, Dorian, you there?
No, that's Dennis.
Well, I got you. There you go. Hold on, Dorian. We lost you for a second, bringing Dennis on.
No, this is Dennis. Dorian's still going.
I'm stopped.
There you go. Okay, there you are. Yeah. Well, you're on a lag, Dennis. You're on a few second lag if you were listening in. Dorian, you cut out for about 3 to 5 seconds.
Okay. I'm almost done with this one.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
We can get to Dennis. I dug these 36 bullets out of the hole, and I realized what had happened was the cartridge box had been laying upside down with the plate on the flaps up, and the guy came along, detected the big brass cartridge box plate, dug down, found it, was all excited and elated like I had been, and he never checked his hole. So he left 36 bullets, and what was neat about that was they a full round, a full load in the cartridge box was considered to be 40 rounds. There were 36. So that tells me that wounded soldier fired 4 rounds before he was wounded. I mean, I don't know for sure, but there's a good chance, if you know what I mean. So anyway, I came out. My point was, I came out at the end of the day with my pouch bulging with relics. I had well over 100, and I had experienced one of the absolute best relic treasure hunts, if you please, that I had ever had in my life, on the site that I almost walked away from.
Right. Almost gave up on it before you even tried it.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Okay. We now return control of your television. No, that's an old TV show. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead, Dennis. What you got?
Hey guys, I was sitting here listening to that, and it reminded me. I think I shared with you, Mike, about this. But years ago, I think it's 78 or so, we had a structure fire and at a house up on the north side of Fort Worth, and we managed to save the foundation of a pier beam house, and we did a good job on that part, and what was kind of interesting, the owners lived in Dallas, and they came there, and they told me that that it was okay for me to metal detect. I asked permission, and they said fine. So I went back the next day when I was off from the fire station, and I was metal detecting. I happened to look up on what was remaining of the foundation, and I saw a old vinyl floor. The roll type was left on there. And I thought, oh, that's cool. There's a scuttle hole there. And so I went up there and I moved the debris away from the scuttle hole. And, sometimes people getting in and out from underneath the house, well, they'll drop things. And so that's my logic and thinking process as I do this. So I get it completely cleared away from the hole. I open up the opening there, and there's a Wells Fargo box sitting in the opening.
Wow.
And that is very similar to what I did. However, I was in the midday, and there were people around, some are just kind of nonchalantly walking, and the paranoid me says, oh my God. And I put the scuttle hole material back in there, covered up with debris, and I went down half a block, and I sat for the all afternoon in the heat and waiting for sundown. Well, once sundown came and it got dark, I was like a cat burglar, sort of. And I went to this house, to that, and I lifted that thing off. And inside is this box, and it's heavy. Dorian, you know how heavy they are. And so I picked this thing out, and I took it. I backed my truck up, put it up in the truck, and I ran home. And it was plenty heavy, and I don't have a clue how much they weigh or anything. And I get to the house, and I back into the garage, and I open the son of a gun up after I get it out of the truck, and it was empty. But there was no lock on it. But someone at some point in time, early 1900s, late 1800s, because that's how old this place was, they had obviously gotten hold of that box. I'm sure there was something in it, right? And when it came up to my turn to get the box, there was nothing in it. But here's the thing. Sometimes when I have been hunting treasure or caches or whatever, Civil War stuff, relics, whenever I am, sometimes I get that surprise treasure without even looking at it. And I know there's lots of stories of people out there doing that. Well, it's kind of like the second cache I ever found. But with this one, I thought, man, where there's one, there's got to be some more. And I went back to that location, and in the back was this great big oak tree. And there's actually a formula that I got it after that, but I'll share that with folks sometime through your site, Mike. But anyway, this big oak tree sitting there, and I start back there, and I start looking around that thing, and I found it was 23 silver dollars. Now, they were not in a container, but they were all from 1880s to 1897 was the newest one, and they were all just sitting there. I never would have expected that because this was a poor neighborhood at that point in time. The house was 70-some-odd years old, and I was going to be satisfied just finding a few coins. But what happened is when I got that treasure or the Wells Fargo box, I did like I've done other times. I thought, there could be something else there. And that's actually what my first treasure or first cash was absolutely accidental. The second one was because of the first one. Same thing happened right here. And it kind of got me to thinking what you were talking about, Dorian, earlier. I got to thinking about outside that box, and I went back to that site, and I found those silver dollars. Never would have found them had it not been for that Wells Fargo box, because I'd have figured out it was a big old tin can down there, and I was not in dig it all mode,
Yeah.
Anyway, I wanted to share that one. And
that's great.
I think thinking outside the box, like you were talking about, and doing that even when you research. And one of the things as an adjuster in my second life, when I go to a hurricane or something, I ask everybody, do you know any women or men going through a divorce could use money? I'd like to rent their home. They go live with relatives. Well, the longest it's ever taken me to get a house to stay in when I've been doing adjusting is 4 days.
Wow.
So that cuts bills down tremendously. But here's my point. When you're in metal detecting mode, and especially when you're looking for caches, every single person that you run into, if you can work it in the conversation, ask them if they know of any stores in the area. And I have quite a few leads. I mentioned when I was interviewed before, but I've got counties that I have notebooks for those counties, and I've got so much in there I couldn't even go through it. But that's the thing. If you make it a point to ask people and jot it down, when, where, who they are, phone number, contact, all that, it gives you a record of what they were talking about. And it's kind of like who, what, where, when, why. When I go looking for stuff, if I'm hunting buried coins or rings or whatever I'm looking, that's one of the big questions that you want to try and answer. And it's a great concept from my perspective and in my experience. To don't be shy. You look for the oldest people and ask them what their daddy said, uncle, whatever. But it's worked for me. And so, anyway, I just wanted to share that. Didn't mean to take away from you guys, No,
it's great, Dennis. Thanks for calling in. And,
absolutely.
Yeah, I appreciate that very much.
All right. We'll see y'all.
Yeah. Okay, Dennis. Mike, that Dennis, he triggered. I'm glad he called because he triggered something that I wanted to discuss. All of us have seen we've been exposed to the movies and stuff about Wells Fargo stagecoach robberies, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Wells Fargo boxes like he's talking about. By the way, he's got quite an artifact there. If it says Wells Fargo on it, he got a treasure, even though it's empty. We had one that a treasure was found in the Garrett Museum when I was there. The guy donated it to us. He didn't donate the treasure, though. But anyway, the San Francisco Mint produced a lot of U.S. $20 gold pieces that were shipped back east and to the south. And they stagecoaches got hit in Arizona, New Mexico, not so much Texas as Oklahoma. Oklahoma had a lot of bona fide stagecoach robberies, and many of these stagecoaches were carrying these freshly minted $20 gold pieces. And a couple of my instructors, the professional treasure hunters, they were a team, and I was sitting around the campfire with them, and they were telling me, some of their stories. And if I've mentioned this one before on the show, then I apologize, but I think it really fits this show. We need to make this point, and there's certainly people that are listening that didn't hear me tell it the first time. So the rest of you grit your teeth and hang on. They did their research well, and the story was that these 4 outlaws hit the stagecoach, got the strong box, And a strong box full of $20 gold pieces is very, very heavy. If Dennis's chest had been full, he would not have moved it by himself. Well, Dennis is pretty determined. He'd have found a way, but, he'd had to get some equipment or something. This thing in the movies where they take the strong box, they throw it down from the boot up on top of the stagecoach, and it's full of gold, that didn't happen.
Right.
Well, anyway, these guys had the story. The story was that the posse got on the outlaws' trail pretty quick, and that they cornered them in a box canyon, had a shootout, and they killed 3 of the 4 outright in the shootout, and the 4th one was wounded, but he lived, went to prison, and they did not find the strong box. And the guy that was wounded wasn't going to tell. So he died in prison without ever telling what was happening to the strong box.
Wow.
So these guys they knew the general area where the box canyon was, but nobody knew which box canyon. These guys managed to even get the records of the posse's expenses, proving, that there had been a posse, and they found the old newspaper reports. The thing about the outlaws, the shootout, and the one going to prison, all of that was verified, but they didn't know where the box canyon was, other than it was in this long mountain, miles and miles and miles long, that had a row of box canyons coming off of one side. So they started at one end and started working those box canyons. And they would work, a couple, 3 canyons a year, and then come back the next year and do the same thing. And this went on for, I think he said, 5 years. And finally, they got to this one canyon, and they were working their way up the canyon on the canyon floor with their metal detectors. And one of them got a signal, and it was a canteen. So they slowed down and began to hunt around, and quickly, it was near the end of the canyon, and they started finding frying pans, camp gear, old camp gear from the 1800s. And so they got to the end of the canyon, and there was kind of a boulder field, that had fallen from the walls at the very end. And they started finding in the sandy soil in front of the boulder field, they were finding fired .44 caliber bullets, pistol bullets. And they got up close to the rocks, and they started finding fired .45 caliber pistol bullets. And it became obvious to him that a gun battle had taken place there. So they concluded that they had finally found the outlaws' camp, and that this was where the shootout had taken place. So one of the guys walked back into the boulder field and tried to look at what the outlaws saw as they were having this final shootout with the posse. And he realized that they probably hadn't had time to dig a hole and bury the box. So he began looking and studying the rocks and the boulders, and he saw 2 big boulders up against each other that formed they were round enough, they formed kind of a triangle at the bottom, and he noticed rocks filling that triangle, and he realized that wasn't natural, that the rocks had been stacked there. So he went over, he said he pulled out 3 rocks, and he could see the Wells Fargo box sitting there in that space between the boulders. And they tugged it out, and the outlaws hadn't even got it open. The lock was still intact on it. And they shot the lock off. They carried pistols for rattlesnakes, and they shot the lock off, like in the movies, kind of. And sure enough, he said the coins were still in the wrappers, paper wrappers, and the wrappers just crumbled to dust when they touched them. But they were mint, absolutely uncirculated San Francisco mint $20 gold pieces. Excuse me. But you see, the amount of effort they put into that, but look what it resulted in.
Yeah, that's incredible. Just incredible. I can't imagine what it would be like to find a cache like that.
Well, I knew of another couple of guys. They hunted outlaw loot. That was their specialty. Down in Texas, in that area, you're a lot more likely to encounter treasure hunters that they focus on outlaw loot. Because it was a wild and woolly west out there. That started in Texas, believe me. You didn't have to get to Arizona, or Idaho or Wyoming or somewhere to be in the wild and woolly west. Texas was definitely it. And sorry, I lost my train of thought there. I apologize. Help me out, Mike.
You were just saying how it started here in Texas, or it was here in Texas, and I don't know where you were going with it. You really hadn't said much more than that.
Yeah, I don't either. I just wanted to make a final comment about the outlaw loot. It was something to do with it. Well, anyway, old man's memory and all that. Here in the things we've talked about in the treasure stories, there's a pattern, and I would like everybody to catch this. That pattern is that yes, you can buy a lottery ticket and you might hit big. But if you're going to spend your life trying to hit big more than once, you're probably not going to do it buying lottery tickets. You're going to have to persevere. That's what these guys did. They put the effort. They didn't get bent out of shape because they worked 2 box canyons or 3 in a year, and they found nothing. Not a trace, not a hint, not a fired bullet. That would indicate that the event had taken place there. But they knew that if they kept working those canyons, sooner or later, they were going to hit the one where they had documented a shootout had taken place. You see my point?
Mm-hmm.
And once they did that, once they found where the shootout took place, he said they found the box in 20 minutes. 20 minutes.
Wow.
Now, see, the metal detectors were key because they found the campsite. They found the canteens and the frying pan that was knocked over upside down and stuff like that. But they didn't actually find the box with the metal detector.
That is wild. Dennis brought up a point where he took me. He told me a bunch of the history, and that was so cool to me. And I don't, obviously I can't give anything up, but wow, what a rich area that he took me to. Very neat.
Well, Texas is full of that kind of stuff. And I've got the same thing here where I live in north central Kentucky. It's just a different type of history.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Yeah. I would be like, I think I'd wither away if I wasn't in a historical area. I love it so much. Mm-hmm. And there's so much here that I'll never learn it all, in the time I've got left on this earth. But I'll have fun learning more of it. That's for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's what got me into metal detecting, and for a lot of us, our love of history. I'm not really proud of it, but when I was in school, I went to school to socialize. I really did. I didn't put into it what I wish I had. Well, but, thankfully, Dorian, I'm so smart to begin with. Boy, that sure got a chuckle out of me. That tells you how smart Dorian thinks I am right there. That right there explains that.
Well, no, Mike, it's obvious. There's not one single Mike Squatch in captivity, so you must be smart.
Right. But, when I was in Ohio history class or in a class where we were learning different things on history. I had a teacher that wasn't even he actually didn't teach me history. He did teach a history class, but he would get into these stories. He had his master's in history, and he would just tell us these stories. And I think because I enjoyed them so much, he would keep telling them. And that's really what got me into metal detecting was that it's my love of history. There are people that go out, hunt the beaches, and find significant money in a year's time. These guys that have perfected it, and they know when to get out there and hit, whether it's freshwater or saltwater.
Oh, yeah.
And they know when to hit it and what areas to hunt, and they make significant money. I know I've heard of guys that, there's one guy that I was told he's related to a friend of mine that he's a clad hunter. He loves going to the schools and parks and finding clad, and he knows these places that get replenished, and it's nothing for him to go out in the summer and find upwards of $2,000 in clad and stuff, and then he'll find, and I believe it because, when I first started, I found a school. We averaged about, my brother and I figured we averaged about $6-7 an hour. I mean, just quarter after quarter after quarter after quarter everywhere, dimes. And, there's schools and parks like that out there. If that's what, you can become the best at whatever form of this hobby you take. And really, when it comes down to it, I think looking for history, unless you're in a Civil War rich area or, maybe Revolutionary War, probably nothing more, could have a payday like Civil War relics. But I think most of us relic hunters, we're really in it for the history and the love of it, because there's a lot of ways that you could make money at this hobby. I'm not saying you're going to get rich or you're going to make a living, but you could supplement your income. I remember years ago reading an article about guys out in Arizona, Nevada, and stuff like that retired and had weeks they'd go out and find $300 to $500 in gold. Some weeks they didn't. It was $100 worth of gold or whatever, but you can literally supplement your income like that. But us relic hunters, not that it's about money anyhow, but if you were to put a monetary value on the relics overall, we're probably the ones that would make the least amount of money in most cases. Like I said, unless you're in a Civil War rich area.
Well,
wouldn't you agree with that?
Yeah, the thing about, and let me speak for treasure hunters long gone, okay? Mm-hmm. If I could be their voice for a minute. They used the money they found. Now, they did come across, historical artifacts. And they did sell them because they were professional treasure hunters. Mm-hmm. But they tried to find them homes and museums and places like that, the really good stuff they found. They were interested more in caches of gold and silver, bullion and coins is basically what they were hunting. Mm-hmm. Boxes of outlaw loot, things like this. And what they saw as the value of their treasures they found was it bought their freedom to keep on going wherever they wanted to, having a nice motorhome that could carry all their gear, and maybe a big tired dirt bike so they could get out in the desert areas if that's where they hunted and stuff like that. They used their treasures to update their equipment and, to pay their bills and to buy them the freedom to start another treasure project. And because, every treasure project requires some expense. You get into things like Oak Island and stuff like that, and I'll tell you what, I'll guarantee you 90% of all the treasure associated with Oak Island is what Hollywood's made off exploiting it.
Right,
Or,
right,
you
right.
know, that's where the treasure has been.
I want to say something, Dorian. I just want
Sure.
to back it up a little bit. I don't get me wrong. I have no problem with people that are into selling their finds, even if it's relics and stuff. It used to kind of bother me a little bit. I think it gives a bad. It kind of can make the hobby look bad. But in the end, we can't take it to the grave with us. If you can put it in somebody's collection that'll appreciate it and love it and keep it going, what's the matter if you made money off of it or whatever? I don't have a problem with it at all. And I know the old timers especially, where a lot of them sold their stuff.
Well, they did. They kept certain pieces. I mean, if you ever got it or were invited into their homes, you'd see special things that they kept. But what I'm saying is, and quite frankly, I never expected this. This caught me by surprise because my impressions of treasure hunters were what I saw, growing up on the cover of magazines like Argosy magazine, a men's magazine, and you might have a guy that looked like Indiana Jones, and he's got a .45 pistol in one hand and a well-endowed lady his arm around her on the other hand, and at his feet is a stack of gold bars, and he's got this determined, hard look in his face, like nobody's getting my gold. And that was kind of the impression, growing up that I had of treasure hunters. And then I actually got to meet the guys that made their living hunting treasure when I, of course, worked for Garrett. And, they were all Charlie Garrett's friends. And I was the new kid on the block, even if I was nearly 6'2", not quite 6'2", and, 220 pounds. They took me under their wing. I was Charlie's protege the way they looked at it, and so they just kind of adopted me. And I, to my surprise, I found out, quite frankly, that these were some of the finest people on the face of the earth. They were generous to a fault. They were not greedy of money. They were good businessmen. They knew, and the thing that stood out in all these guys, they were endowed with finely honed common sense. They did not make, emotional decisions. They made good decisions based on what they had seen and experienced and knew what worked and what didn't work and this type of a thing. And, I just fear that there needs to be a generation. Every generation needs to have some of those guys like salt sprinkled in the detector among the detectorists, because they were truly fine human beings. They were good friends. They were loyal. Never saw one of them. Well, I know one case where one treasure hunter betrayed his buddy after 25 years of hunting when they actually found a treasure. But this guy was ex-CIA, and I'd always been kind of suspicious of him because he was kind of flaky, but he did pull a gun on his partner and ran him off when they found the treasure. And but that was a rare instance, like I said, and I still find that today. One of the reasons why, I have a Facebook group, it gives me the chance to meet and associate with people that are cut out of that same piece of cloth. And, it's just one of the it's a treasure to me to be able to associate and converse. And hopefully, we'll start to do some hunts with some of the guys. And I've been on several, and I was not on one of them that wasn't really, really enjoyable. Even though we didn't find a lot or we had a bad day, we didn't have a bad day because we had the treasure of like-minded fellowship. And, we find ourselves, we say, yeah, okay, we didn't find anything today on this site, but we're already looking forward to the next hunt. It's always forward, always the next hunt. It could be just around the corner, excuse me, just happened to me. And the irony here is, pardon me, Mike, we have this great national tragedy going on. And it is what is keeping me here at home, because I've got some exotic places that are several hours of driving away, and I can't drive to them right now. I wouldn't have gone and worked this site yesterday if it wasn't for the fact it was very close to home, and I wasn't going to have to expose myself to anybody that, where I might pick up this virus. So in the sense that it kind of boggles my mind that in an hour of tragedy for our nation, that if this would come unexpectedly, I thought, well, I'll just go out and work it a while. And I didn't know that I would finally find the clue I needed, to find, as I told somebody on the All Metal Mode a while ago, they said, how deep was it? It was too deep to be detected. I found the entrance to the cache is how I found it. I did not find the entrance with my detector. I'll tell you that right up front. I found it out of sheer experience and having worked to hone my powers of observation. Dennis knows exactly what I'm talking about. And, that's just, the person that's got 2 years of coin hunting under their belt, they would have walked right by this site and never even given it a thought. But I spotted something out of place. And I said that just like the guys that saw the rock stacked between the deals, see, they taught me, look for something out of place. Look for something that's not quite normal or right in relation to the story you have or whatever. And it led to the discovery. So I wish I could say, oh yeah, my Garrett AT Pro picked it up, no problems, and I just dug it right up out of the ground. And here you go, Garrett metal detectors. How much will you pay me for this story? Right?
Right.
But that's not the way it happened. So,
Oh, cool. I can't wait to hear
it. Well, you've heard probably as much as I'm going to be able to, to say right now. But I really would be thrilled. One of the greatest experiences I'd love to have is to have somebody that's heard us talk at some point send me maybe a private, message with a picture saying, Dorian, look what I dug up. I took your advice and did such and such and such and such, and this is what I got. I'd be like a father proud of his firstborn son, or daughter.
Hold on 1 second.
Yep.
Dorian. We've got Dennis calling in, or I think we missed it. Let me call him in.
Okay.
This is Dennis Wynn. At the tone, leave your name, phone number.
Well, that didn't work. Dennis, when you get back in, try calling again, and we'll hopefully we can get you in. Go ahead. I'm sorry, Dorian.
Yeah.
I was afraid you were going to cut out, and when I took his call, so I wanted to pause you real quick.
Not a problem. This is fine. So, when you're on the other side of actually having found a rare artifact or a cache or whatever, it can seem so far out of sight. As you go out on trips and detecting, and you're coming back with a few coins or whatever, and. For all of us, truly, every bucket lister that I have found in my 48 years, and I still have a whole list of them I haven't found yet, all right? Mm-hmm. I can say, I know I can go to my grave knowing that I did dig up some gold. There was a few gold coins in this cache. I've never dug a single gold coin. I have trained over 500 people to use metal detectors, and probably half of them have found a gold coin. Keith Wells finds them so frequently, I just want to go screaming into the woods. I love Keith. I really do, and I never have. I mean, I just know if I go out with Keith, I know what he's going to hand me on a platter by the end of the day. I automatically know it. He's I don't know how he does it, but Mike, but he does. And, so, but you just keep going. I can't, each one of us is going to have a different collection of finds. We're going to have some things that you expect to find, but you're going to come across things that you never dreamed of. You never expected to find. They're just going to come out of the blue. You won't have any advance warning. Little bells won't be going off in your head. You'll think, you go on a battlefield and you think you're digging, you dug 75 mini balls and you dig another one. And you think, well, this one's going to be this is another mini, ho hum, and you dig it out and there it is. It's collided with another mini and it's something special, or it's got like the one I've got from Gettysburg that has a piece of a Confederate soldier's button on the end of the nose. You just you never know. But see, if you keep, the only way you can get to those rare finds is to keep digging finds.
Absolutely. Real quick, let's try to call Dennis back in.
Okay.
Let's Dennis, we're calling.
Hey,
Dennis, there you are.
There he is.
Oh, are we still on lag?
Probably, yeah. You're always on lag as a listener by a few seconds.
All right. Well, just right quick, I was enjoying your story about the Confederate bullet on the end of on the end of your bullet there. A couple of things comment that, to my knowledge and experience, and kind of what I was taught about looking for treasures in particular, or caches, or in the case of the strongbox, Dorian, that you were sharing the story about. That stuff weighed so much, and you made a really good point. I'll illustrate it, and I can say a little bit about this thing I've been looking for 4 years. Is it roughly 208 pounds of gold coin, so a little over $40,000 face value. And back in the day, they had those things, and even if they got them out of the strong box, you put that on a horse and try and get away with it, even sure you're going to beat the horse bad, and you're not going to get very far. And so the way I was taught years and years ago would be that they would have lookouts. They wanted to be somewhere around half the distance from point A to point B. So they had to figure where they were going, the stagecoach, for instance. So they had to figure where they were going after they were robbed. They'd take it, and then they would have somebody watching out, perhaps, but they'd move it a little ways, and they'd either bury it or they would cover it over on the side of a hill, like on a box canyon. In your case, you were talking about the two boulders that they had built up the rocks. But the way I was taught early on in life was that they would take that, put it up under a big rock, and then just cave stuff over it. And the other point that I think that you guys probably already know was, they rarely buried it beyond the length of their arm where they could reach down and get hold of it. In the case of the one that you, Dorian, just got through finding that cache, great job, brother, by the way.
Thanks, sir.
But that cache, you now kind of have some semblance of idea about how that guy buried or took or put money in the ground, his thinking process. And that's so important, in my opinion, that you're able to get into that thinking process of what that person was thinking, or the way that they kind of put it together to put it down the hole. And I think you were spot on, too, when you made the comment. It's not always the metal detector. The old thing, 99% of this stuff is research, and I've shared this. I see it personally that I need to try and, disprove what I have as much as prove it. Because that thing, the old adage, if you miss it by an inch, you missed it by a mile. But when you're able to slip into that mode, Dorian, like you did, then that brings you to the reward that you found. And now the cool thing to my thinking is you now have an idea how this guy thinks. And so there's a good chance that this second cash that you're looking for there is not going to be found with a metal detector, be my thinking. And your observation of seeing that, something out of place, and I absolutely agree with that. And I think that in the case of the one that I'm looking for now, and I want to bring this up because it's also the point of kind of luck in a way. What tipped me to what I believe is the exact location in terms of a small area, but I can't define it too much. But regardless, there was an old lady in the library that was 82 years old or so, and I asked her, "Do you have any more information on this family?" And she said, "Oh yeah, down in the basement, there's a box of letters." And she let me have access to these letters. And there was one of them written by the daughter-in-law of the guy that put the money in the ground, writing to her daughter, explaining whose property the gold was on. And it's like, really?
Whoa!
Like, they were 8 miles off, the family. They had looked for 160 years. And when I started pursuing that, I found that indeed, back in the mid-1800s, the guy that put the money there owned that piece of property. And so now I'm to the point where I have week before last, I located his old house. And it's just amazing because that lucky part in it is the part that you just can't account for it. Now, I believe in God and country and Jesus. You know that. And I'm going to tell you that God allowed it to happen. That's in my world. And I'll shout it from the top of the hill that it actually came about because it was meant to be. But to think of it in the natural, who would have thought that some 82-year-old stranger, and it goes back what I was saying, you talk to everybody, some 82-year-old little grandma held the key to probably, I think it's in conservative, I think it's $3 million treasure, and it could go as high as 8 or 10. And they're going to be just like what you said earlier, between the boulders where those coins were in the pristine condition they were put in the ground or put in the strongbox in. And these should be the same way. But anyway, I just wanted to contribute to that perspective, kind of what I saw, what you were sharing earlier. And I really think it's important for people to understand that regardless of what they're looking for, there's still going to be a methodology that they use. And one more quick story, if I can. I know you guys probably running late here, but
no, we're doing good. Go ahead.
There was a guy in Dallas that he was the heir to a chocolatier company, and he lived next door to my now deceased father-in-law. And when they got to talking to me, my father-in-law, and he knew I metal detected and treasure hunted and did all sorts of stuff, and he had never told me this story, but this chocolatier heir believed that somewhere on his property at this Dallas lot had buried money from his father, who was the original chocolatier. And so what this guy had done in his kitchen, he had, I measured this thing, a hole that was 27 inches in diameter. It was 53 feet straight down. And in his attic, he had made from an electric motor on 2 handmade rails, he had made a drilling device, and he was drilling sideways, basically, in the hole, trying to find that gold. I found his notes, and he was an engineer, and he had all these notes of how he was trying to find that gold. And it's still in the ground, but I never could understand his thinking, because while most people might put it hand deep or less, or, thereabouts, this guy went so deep underground, it was phenomenal. And he was paranoid. All the dirt and everything was up in his attic. And I thought, boy, the person that gets under that when it collapses is going to get hurt. But I'll tell you also, which is kind of a treasure, when I got up there in the attic, I found a violin from about 1870, still intact. And I ended up giving that to his family, which they were thrilled. But anyway, it's just thinking about people and getting kind of into their mode of thought. And what you did, Dorian, with this cash, I'm so proud for you and of you.
Thank you.
You know, you were rewarded because you did something that most people out there that don't have that experience never would think to do. And you find that thing that's out of place, and you think outside the normal box, perhaps, and you didn't even use a metal detector. And we go back, we talked last time about witching sticks. We're still going to have to talk about that in another show.
Yeah.
But anyway, all right, that's all I wanted this time.
Well,
back to you guys.
Thank you, Dennis. Appreciate your comments.
Thank you, Dennis.
Very much. Yeah.
All right. Carry on.
Yeah. It's
he reminded me of a really cool story I want to share real quick. My brother still does some, but he got out of roofing. He used to have a roofing company, and now he's more into remodeling. You know, roofing's a young man's job, and he'll still work on them, but he moved more into remodeling. And years ago, he was working. He put a roof on an older couple's house. And for whatever reason, he had to get up in the attic. When he got up in there, he found a box of gold coins.
whoa.
And he popped down out of the attic, and he said, "Did you know you had a box of gold coins up here?" And that old man, I forgot about those.
Really?
But, you know, that brings up a good point, I think, as well. You know, we always talk about, you know, these caches, they were... you know, somebody died sudden is usually what we suspect happened. But I'll tell you another one that goes along with that. My father bought my grandfather's house many years ago, and my grandparents moved down to Florida, and Grandpa left some stuff that he didn't care to move or whatever. You know, they limited what they were taking and told my dad to get rid of it or, you know, keep it, whatever. And down in the basement was like an old barrel, a wood barrel. And I don't know how many was in there or how full it was, but I know it was a significant amount. There was something on the top of it. It was so heavy my dad couldn't move it, and he started cleaning it out. I don't know how far down he got, but it was all silver coins.
Oh.
And this is like a big 50-gallon wooden drum, and from what I remember, it seems like it was halfway full or more. And, you know, my grandfather had forgot he had done that. He lived in that house for a lot of years. At some point, he must have quit doing it, and somehow that escaped his mind. And I know that sounds ridiculous, but, you know, this old guy forgot that he had a box of gold coins up in his attic.
Wow.
You know, so I don't necessarily, you know, I know that sounds crazy to us, but, you know, something else to think about. I wonder if any of you, you know, have a jar of clad coins laying around somewhere you forgot. You know, I mean, you got to think back then, you know, when they were hoarding, they might have had several caches. You know, they filled one up and left it there and, you know, figured they'd get back to it when they needed it. And they never had a time when they needed it, and it got forgotten. And I think that's very possible. I wouldn't think it's possible. But knowing that my grandfather did that, knowing that this old guy forgot he had a box of gold coins up in his attic, you know, it obviously had to have happened sometimes.
Yeah, it did, Mike. There's all kinds of reasons why, you know, people forgot. I mean, dementia would set in, you know, and they would just forget. And again, we had a very different kind of society, you know, up until the 60s. The rural men did not tell their women where they buried their money because they felt like if somebody came in like a home invasion and tried to torture them into revealing where their money was buried, that if their wife knew where it was buried, she would tell the would-be thief to save her husband. So, they didn't want to lose their money. They'd work too hard for it, and they would endure torture, as it were, the way they looked at it. And so if something happened to this guy, a heart attack, a stroke, he fell out of the loft and landed on his head,
right.
a mule kicked him in the head while he was shoeing it, and lights out, or broken neck. If any of those things happened, the money was lost.
Yeah. I mean, and I bet that there were scenarios, imagine a young farmer, starting his farm. He's away from town. They didn't trust banks, and he slowly works up to a jar of silver coins he's got buried. And then, the next thing you know, he's got another jar going or 2 or 3 more jars going because business is successful. Back then, I think in some cases it was easier to make money. They weren't so materialistic, and the next thing you know, he's lost count of how many jars he's got buried. He forgot one because it's been years since he's thought about it because he's been working on other jars that he works out of,
Well, yeah, you're right. That's not a fantasy you're describing. That is reality. That did happen. And, these post-hole banks, as we've kind of we've used that term for so many years. Of course, mine was the size of a post-hole bank. It would have fit into a post-hole, but it wasn't in a post-hole. And but anyway, there were that is the single biggest source of treasures yet to be found.
Yeah,
there are hundreds of thousands of these things, and it's if anybody had read my book, Battle to Battle, and they read the last 3 of the last chapters about bushwhackers. The bushwhackers were deserters from both armies, and they would pick a prosperous farmer that was out in a rural area where he didn't have any neighbors next to him, and they would rob him, and they would do terrible things to his family, and then when they were done, they would kill all the whole family and burn the house. Well, anything that and there were, quite frankly, there were actually over the whole Civil War theater, there were thousands of people that died this way.
Yes,
and
people that buried their money. They knew that the other side was coming through, and I read a book years ago. It's not about treasure or anything like that. It's about Morgan's raids into Ohio, and I don't recall what it was, but like I said, that book is not about treasure, but as you read that, you can't help but think about what was lost. Morgan and his men come up into Ohio and they were looting. People were getting word that they were coming that way, and they were burying their coins and their silver and any of their valuables. You can't tell me some of those didn't get lost. There's stories of men falling asleep and falling off their horses. They're so tired running from the Union Army. And some of those guys, you can't tell me they didn't bury silver and gold in hopes of coming back for it that they'd plundered on their trips through Ohio, their trip through Ohio.
Well,
and I think those are real treasures that are out there still to be found.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, I wrote a book on Morgan. And so I've done a lot of research. And one of the projects I'd hoped to work, and I've never got started on it yet, Mike, is that here's what a lot of people don't understand. Those Confederate soldiers, you're right, they looted, and they had gold and silver coins in their pockets. And if they were caught with those after they were captured, everybody knew that those soldiers were not paid, in those gold, big silver dollars and gold coins and stuff. If they were caught with those, they would be an automatic hanging for them or a firing squad because that would prove to the Yankee captors, the cavalry captors, that they were looters, and that's all the excuse they needed. So when they saw that they were going to be captured, these guys fled into wooded areas and they hid those gold and silver coins, and a lot of them went to prison and died and never, or killed in the subsequent battles. There's 3 or 4 areas towards the end of the campaign that should be prime for finding small caches of gold and silver coins.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. And I absolutely believe those are out there like that. And those post hole caches, I believe in those, 100%. I think for anybody wanting to do that, to put some real time. And, I want to say it was Keith Wills, and I know Dennis mentioned it when he was on. Talk to people of the community. Dennis has a real neat story. I can't share it. I can't give anything up, but he was in a community and just going around, talking to the people. Is there any stories of buried treasure or anything, people hoarding money and that kind of stuff? And he got a really, really fascinating lead that he shared with Gypsy and I, that was just going and talking to the locals. And I think, that's probably your best bet on finding some of the, if you're going to find of course you can luck out and find a post hole cache, but I think, that's your best bet. Just like the story I was talking about, they bought that house, and, as they would go out to dinner, and I'm talking about small community. We're not talking any Walmarts or, sit down, any of the few sit down restaurants in the area are, little mom and pop places. There's no chains. And, they'd go into they'd go in on a Saturday morning, 3rd or 4th time, and locals are like, "Oh, we've seen you a few times. Did you buy a place down here or something?" Yeah, yeah. And where'd you where you live at? And tell them, I heard, boy, I always thought maybe he, when he passed, they said he didn't have any money in his accounts and this and that. Well, where'd his money go? And you get talking to people like that, and now that story. Don't know if there is any cash there anywhere. But it's a lead. It's a lead that you're not going to get unless you talk to locals and stuff. And I think that's a great way to go look for caches. And absolutely, Dorian, I am getting absolutely exhausted sitting here. I need to get up and move. We about ready to call it quits on tonight.
I'd like to take one more shot at the story.
You go right ahead.
Okay, this one's a good finale, I think. Earlier, I was talking about my buddy Alex up in Cincinnati that is so good, at treasure hunting with or without a metal detector. And one of the things that Alex and his hunting partner did, they had business cards printed, and they passed them out to insurance companies in the Cincinnati area, where they would find missing valuables for, on estates and things for the insurance companies for 15% of the value. See, otherwise the insurance companies had to pay off on the insurance, like a $75,000 diamond ring, for example. Mm-hmm. And they got quite a bit of response from the insurance companies, and they were asked to go in on this estate, this mansion belonging to a very successful retired Cincinnati dentist. And the guy had, made investments, and he'd made more money off of those and all this kind of stuff. Anyway, he'd been a recluse for the last 25 years of his life. And he had a great big spacious yard, with a wrought iron fence around this big giant 2 or 3 story brick mansion. But he'd let the yard grow up. He'd never mowed it, and the whole yard had turned into forest. It was full of, trees. And the house inside was something that's often typical of old people that become hoarders. There were only small paths to walk through with giant stacks of newspapers on both sides. And various things scattered here and there. And so Alex and his partner began the search of this property for the insurance company. And I'm not sure exactly, what they were looking for, but what they found was unbelievable. They found 3 55-gallon drums full of silver dollars.
Wow.
And that was just the beginning. They found stacks of $100 bills in the refrigerator, the freezer. They found very, very expensive diamond jewelry. And Alex was walking back through this narrow pathway between the newspapers, and he bumped a stack, and part of the stack fell. And out of the top newspapers, there was 3 $100 bills.
Oh.
And there's thousands of these newspapers all through this, house stacked. And they had to go through every single one of them, and they found money in every single stack. And when they got done, finally searching the whole house, basement, attic, second story, I think he said they had $475,000, and they got 15% of it.
Wow. That's amazing.
Truly.
That's amazing. Yeah.
Whoever first said treasure is where you find it sure knew what they were talking about.
Right. Wow, that's interesting. You got me, all this talk, I want to go look for caches. I'm going to go look for them old fence rows.
Yep. I would like to, at some point after the crisis or whatever, I'd like to run a cache hunting class and just, take people, the beginners, and show them how to approach these sites. I can set up a site where I can hide target caches and things, and teach them how to spot, how to find things like that based on what real life situations. This thing. Now that I know, I never expected to find this cache first. I thought I would find the other jar first, and I thought I really had it nailed down to a 20 by 20 area, and I struck out every time. I'm just frustrated on it, and now I have a clue as to how he did it. Now I know what to look for. Since I actually found this other one, I'm sure he's going to have hidden the other jar in a similar fashion. He wanted to see, he was contemporary enough that he knew about metal detectors, and he set this up so you could not find it with a metal detector. And and that's he thought that's how it would be found, if it was found. But to do that, you have to put a metal detector far enough away from the top of the ground where you can't pick it up. And if you do that, then you have to have a way to get to the cache yourself. So that's really what it came down to. So each cache can be a little bit different, but all in all, I would say if somebody would specialize, and it's hard because there aren't a lot of records, but if you get into this Civil War country like where we are, I'm in an area where people lost their lives to the bushwhackers. There was a bushwhacker shootout on my mountain just about 500 feet from where I'm sitting, and I have found the grave where they killed the bushwhackers, and I found the military relics there to prove there was a fight and the fired bullets. And if these guys had a camp there, that means they were operating in this valley, and that means that there are probably burned down house sites here, and there's probably caches on these sites. So I would think if a person would make a specialty out of looking for bushwhacker sites, there are records, but they're hard to find. You got to dig deep into county records and history books, county history books, and somebody will say, my great grandma, or she lived on the old Solomon place, that got burnt down during the Civil War by the bushwhackers. Boom, there's your lead. See,
mm-hmm.
And if you keep working those kinds of leads, the odds go up and up and up that you're going to find a bushwhacker cache. Actually, it's not the bushwhackers didn't place it; they just didn't get it because the people they killed never gave up the location. So.
Right.
Anyway, the point is, yes, these things are doable, but you got to be motivated. How many people do we have today with detectors, excuse me, that want to find a cache, would even go out on a site and dig a hole and bury a jar of pennies, a mason jar of pennies, to where the top is at least 16 inches, 18 inches below the ground, and then try to pick it up with their detector and listen to the signal? How many people will go to that trouble? I'd say probably,
Right, not many.
Not many. Probably less than 5%. But the people that do, now they have the odds increase in their favor because they know, they have an idea what a jar of coins buried in the ground will sound like.
Right. Yeah, that's a real good tip. Absolutely.
Yeah, so that's what I'm saying. The people see that you approach something with the attitude of a pro. I mean, if you hire a roofer, you want a pro, or you want somebody who says, "I think I can do this."
Right.
And that's what it comes down to. You keep doing things in a professional way, you're going to get results, but maybe not tomorrow, maybe not next month, maybe not next year, but maybe 2 years from now or 5 years from now. I got to tell you, finding a cache, let's see, let me go back just a minute. Excuse me. Okay, I was 24 when I found my first cache. I'm 72, and it feels just as good as it did then.
Right.
So if it takes 5 years for you to find your first cache, it's still going to be a great experience for you. But it may not. There is such a thing, I guess, as beginner's luck.
Right. Well, I don't know. I've never found one. I'd love to find one.
Right. But the point is, Mike, that could all change tomorrow. The next time you go out with Dennis, man, hang on to old Dennis as long as you can and learn everything you can from him.
Yeah, I'd still have fun, but I told him anything I find out where he takes me, I'll give it to him. I'd probably be in tears. I'd probably be crying, but I'm a man of my words. And
yeah, but you know what, Mike? He wouldn't accept it. I know Dennis.
Well, we'd probably end up in a fist fight then, because I couldn't just
no.
When you have somebody like Dennis, and I'll tell you, I guarantee I've been burned, and I've been in it, we figured, less than half of what you and Dennis have been into it. And I know what it feels like to be taken advantage of in this hobby and be burned. And, Dennis, and I'm sure it's because of you, without a doubt, because he didn't know me from anybody else. But Dennis has shared already so much with me, and I feel so fortunate. And just to be able to get out and detect that history, I hope I can find something really cool to add to his collection for where he takes me. And just to get out and experience him and listen to his stories and, let that old pro share his knowledge with me. I don't want to he's listening still. I thought he was gone. I don't want to give the guy a big head here.
You're too late, Mike.
Yeah.
Too late.
He don't need to know that I think he's a legend. That's the last thing we need. But, no, even if I found a cache, I would I'd have to do it. I would. That's just who I am. And, How
Mike,
funny of a story would that be? I found the cash and Dennis wouldn't take it, and we ended up in a fist fight, and I had to walk back to my vehicle, and it might end like that. I don't know.
Well, here's the thing, Mike. If you're going to take on an old geezer, all right, remember, they know in advance that the fight can't go on 20 minutes. So you're going to get everything they got immediately. So get ready.
Well, it wouldn't be much of a fight because I keep my pistol in my back pocket. He's got his on his side ready to go. So it'd probably be me limping back to the car with a bloody leg or something, a scarf tied around it or something.
Well, here's the thing, Mike. Dennis knows what I'm saying when I said you got to have that these guys that were successful had a strong developed common sense, and Dennis has got that. And common sense, he's going to hit you with common sense. He's going to tell you if you find a cache, look, Mike, you need to support your family and you need to be able to go on with doing the things you're doing. And, I want you to have however much he decides to give. Dennis is a giver. And if you don't let him do that, you're insulting him. So you let him make the decision and you go with it.
Our first time out, and I'm not even exaggerating here, Dorian. He put me on a very historical site. The best site by far I've been on since I've been in Texas now for 4 years. And I mean, the first site that got me excited, I mean, really, truly excited. I'm on history here. And I couldn't help myself but to circle out and circle back to see if I could get another story out of him. I mean, he's just, he's lived so much and not just metal detecting. I mean, don't get me wrong, a ton of metal detecting stories, but man, that guy's got some neat stories, and I really enjoy hunting with him. And, I don't want to act like you guys are old or anything, but I've always been that person that prefers to hang out with people much older than me. And I don't know why that is, but, I do. I like people older than me that have knowledge and stuff. And Dennis not been afraid to share it with me one bit, and I really appreciate it.
Yep, we have a handful. We really do, and they're just, to me, they're treasures that belong to everybody. But then again, you have an element among the detectors that they already know it all, and it's.
Hey, remind me the next. I'm sorry, before I forget this, I wanted to tell you this. I don't want to say it on air. The next time we talk, remind me that I have a Dennis Wynn story, and I'll tell him too. I mean, it's nothing I won't share with him, but I want to tell you a story that I really get a kick out of. Remind me it was something I heard about him.
Okay.
And really interesting story. Really interesting.
All righty.
Yeah, but let's wrap it up. I am done. I am just I'm ready to get off here, but thank you all for tuning in. Sorry the show went on so long, but I think it was fun. Dorian, I sure enjoyed it. Yeah.
If they're still with you, they're not sorry the show went on so long.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. All right. Well, but it was great, Dorian, and for kind of last, we did have guests lined up tonight. Something I was really looking forward to. We kind of put this together just today. My fault. I should have had something planned, but I don't know that it could have gone any better, Dorian.
Well, that's great. That's wonderful. Yeah, sometimes we certainly didn't lack spontaneity. We didn't have any choice.
Right. And well, at least we got Dennis to call in. Nobody else called us. We learned some great treasure stories and some techniques and some tips, and we learned Dorian's coming out of the closet. He's
this is going to be worse. Hey, this is going to be worse than Mike Squatch.
Yeah, I was just say you keep calling me Mike Squatch, old man. Keep calling me Mike Squatch. Oh, that's funny.
You call an old man, you young pup.
You're right. I wouldn't want to tangle with you or Dennis. Not for a second. Not for a second.
Well, we wouldn't want you to tangle with us either.
We're all getting too old for that, aren't we?
Yeah,
Too old for that.
I'm glad that we can, amidst all of this, we can have some light moments and laugh.
Man, Dennis just burned me. Burned me. He said, and Mike likes older men. Wow, that got spun right back around on me. Okay, the cat's out of the bag. Dorian and I are married.
No. Oh, dear.
Ew. Yikes. No. Well, let's end on that. I just creeped myself out saying that. Let's call it a night, Dorian. I sure had a lot of fun.
Okay, you bet. And hopefully we'll survive another week and do it again.
Absolutely. We'll be back next week for sure. Everybody take care. Please be safe out there. Stay in unless you have to, and be careful. Definitely.
And y'all take care now. I'll go out and see if I can find another fake cache to post.
Yeah, there you go, Dorian. Go find us go put together another fake cache to get us all excited.
All right.
Good night, everybody. Thanks for tuning in.